Hey everyone, and welcome to this episode of Angle on Producers, the show where we take you behind the scenes and into the shoes of producers across all corners of the entertainment industry to understand who they are, what they do, and why they do what they do. As always, I am your host and fellow producer, Carolina Gropa. However you found the show, thanks for tuning in and doing this live thing with me. If you don't already, please subscribe. Please check us out on Patreon. This is a labor of love, and your support, your financial contribution in whatever amount you can give helps me, keeps this show going, and helps me help others. And so if you are interested and able to support us in that way, please head on over to patreon.com/angleonproducers. Much appreciated. This intro is coming live to you from set, where after many months of being away from the field, of course, as many of you know, I went away and had the most incredible production of my lifetime so far, which is producing a human, a baby. My little boy, Theo, who is now 5 months old. Time genuinely flies. Everybody says it, but when you step into the shoes of a parent, it just is so real. The passage of time. Wild. So it feels really good to be back on set, post becoming a mom, on such a special project with such a special team, and to be reminded of how much I love it. It's been such a hard time for many of us, and to just kind of have that magical feeling I know we've all experienced when the stars align and you have lightning in a bottle on set. To have that right now, especially right now, given the state of the United States of America, just makes me feel so thrilled. And it's a great reminder, honestly, for me that, I'm really good at this. I enjoy it and I'm really good at it, and I've been doing it a long time, and it shows. It's amazing to have crew and cast just mirror back to me what I want to emulate on set, which is all the things I talk about on the show. Integrity, sense of humor, not taking everything too seriously, but taking the work seriously, just creating a safe space for us to collaborate and create art. So it's amazing. And so this episode is actually a recording of a panel that I moderated a couple of weeks ago now for the annual Proof Film Festival in LA. It is the second annual version of this festival, and it's pretty brilliant. It's powered by the American Cinematheque, and it is dedicated solely to the presentation of proof of concept short films that are looking to be expanded into feature-length production, series, etc. And it's here to empower the next generation of cinematic storytellers. This is brilliant, right? Everyone wants to make a short film as a proof of concept, and there's always a million short film festivals. But the fact that Imani Davis, the founder of this festival, has created something where the true intention is for filmmakers, producers, whoever, to go and see what are the proof of concepts, right, that exist for us to then take that to market, be able to raise the financing, attach cast, do all the things for a feature film. As we know, that's a huge barrier to entry for many people, especially underrepresented voices. So if you're not familiar with it, check it out. I have a feeling it's going to continue to grow and expand in amazing ways and create pathways for many stories. So during the panel, I had the pleasure of sitting down with actor-producers Margaret Cho, Michael Oloyede, and Darrell Britt-Gibson to discuss the complexities of their multi-hyphenate career paths. Together, we talked about everything from indie filmmaking to the importance of collaboration and, of course, the current state of the industry. It was a really fun time, and for those of you who couldn't join us in person, I hope you take away as much from this recording as I did while moderating it. So, without further ado, here's our conversation.
Hello, all. Thank you all for joining. We are really excited to have this panel. From the beginning of Proof, we definitely wanted to talk about this. Actor producers. Last year was impossible, of course, with the strikes and such, but we're excited to have this year. We're so excited to partner with the Angle on Producers podcast, hosted by Carolina Gropa. Yes, and it's been a podcast I've been a fan of for a while, and we're super excited to co-present here. So please join me in welcoming our moderator today, Carolina Gropa.
Thanks, y'all. Thanks for turning up on a Saturday. I appreciate it. This is special. I love talking to people because I have a podcast, so that makes sense. And I love talking to people in person and in front of other people so that we can be a part of a collective conversation. It's awesome. So I'm super stoked for this panel, Forging Your Own Path, Actor Producers in Conversation. And I'm so excited for the Film Festival, Proof Film Festival. Amani, thank you for having me, for being here. It's powered by the American Cinematheque, as you guys know. So we're going to just kind of dive right in. So to introduce our panelists, we have Michael Oloyede. Okay, we went over this 3 times outside and I messed it up. So it's Oloyede. Say it with me. Oloyede. Michael. There he is.
Thank you. Thank you.
We have the wonderful Margaret Cho. And Darrell Britt-Gibson. Okay, so I started as an actor, and so this panel is very special for me because I believe very much so that actor turned producers make some of the best producers. Because I think that we come into story first, through character. We live in stories inside one perspective, and then we start to branch out. But also, there is a lovely producer who's actually in the audience, Bobby Sue Luther. When she was on the podcast, she said something to me that always stuck with me, where she said, producing is just scene work, which is you just want to get something out of somebody and you got to find a way to get it, right? And it's no different. And that always stuck with me, and I find that so interesting. So talk a little bit about, obviously, your journey from where you started as an actor or performer into producing, how you found that, what was the impetus to really go there and become a producer?
Yeah. I'll start. It started as a kid being very curious about how the things in the TV, in the box in my living room worked, how the actors went from one scene to the next. I was always obsessed with learning about what that was. Shows like Making the Video or Diary, whatever behind the scenes show I can get my hands on as a kid, I was glued to the TV watching it. And as I grew up, I started acting when I was in 4th grade in school. And as an adult, I started working in events, and I started producing big events, and realized that a lot of the skills that I learned from events were transferable to film and TV, and bringing people together. I think producing is 3 things: people, place, and thing, and that transfers to all different industries. So it started as a kid, and then as an actor, it became a necessity because I wanted to tell stories that I didn't think were being told.
Yeah, I think it is a necessity, because if your story's not out there, like, I agree, like, for me, like, it was just, I needed to find a way to get my stories told, and I started not even as an actor, because I couldn't get acting jobs. There was no venues for actors when I was in the stage of like wanting to become an actor. When I was in my teens and in the 80s, there was just very, very few people of color at all in television and movies. And not that it's much better now, but it is better to some degree. I think there's more visibility now, but it's because people like us are becoming producers and becoming advocates for ourselves. So it's out of necessity. It's so true that we have to create our stories and put them out there because they're not creating a space for us. We have to carve a space for ourselves. So that's where I come at it from.
To echo those sentiments, it's sort of the same thing. I just wasn't seeing the type of stuff being made that I wanted to see. So I realized early on, I was like, well, I can cry about it or I can do something about it. So yeah, I'm not crying. I'm doing something about it.
And when you deliberately decided to make that shift, I mean, some of you are still acting, still performing. Were there any roadblocks you encountered with that identity shift of how, yeah, I've been there, how, perhaps the industry perceived you, good or bad?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, of course, there's like gatekeepers and roadblocks and just even the blocks are they're not even physical. They're these ideas of who can do what or who can tell what story or who can, like when I first came to Los Angeles, this is in the 1980s. So I was sleeping with a very famous actor. And he got me a meeting with his agent. And I was like, oh my God, this is so exciting. So I got a meeting with the agent and the agent told me, okay, you're great, but you you have to understand that Asian people will never be successful in Hollywood, and you have your whole life ahead of you. And I don't want you wasting your life on something that will never happen. So I was like, cool. And then I stopped sleeping with that famous actor because it was done. And then I went, and then 2 years later, I had my own television show, and he was representing one of the actors on the show. And he would see me and he'd be like, hi, remember me? It's Marty. And then he'd turn his back, wouldn't shame.
Did he remember that conversation?
Yes. He was
okay.
he's like, I'm the famous person that told Margaret Cho she could never do anything in this business. And so it was like this, but it was, if I had let that stop, I could have let that stop me. It really bummed me out. Like, it really upset me. Plus I had to fuck that guy. And it you know, there was a lot of things that I didn't want to do to get there, but I don't recommend doing that. Don't sleep with anybody to get anything. But if you do have to, know that it doesn't always get you what you want. But it was like, it was like, if you let people say things like that and then that roadblock remains in your heart, that's like the worst thing. So don't allow any kind of quote unquote criticism to stand in your way, because it's totally like the opinion of that person. It's also just something that they created in their own mind. You don't have to make it real in yours.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would say just I think one of the biggest fears of people in power in Hollywood is us realizing our own power. And so they will try to suppress it in so many ways, because eventually, like, if you beat us down enough, you're like, you know what, maybe this is just as much as I can do and as big as I can become. So it's really about trying to like find the way where you're able to not allow that to happen. That's why I always talk so much about staying grounded, because that is where you're able to really see what is actually, and it will always take you back to you realizing why you got in this thing in the beginning. So it's like, if you get beat down constantly, it's like you don't allow it to actually hurt you, because that's their power, is trying to, sort of deny you of your power. So it's just about, this forging ahead is really what it is, it's everything you got to do, or you sleep with somebody famous.
Yo, he wasn't even hot though. Like, that's the thing. Like, it was like, it's such a bummer. I'll tell you later.
That's even more impressive, though.
You'll feel bad for me when I tell you.
That's more impressive, because you got to do what you got to do, But I think it's an important, like, this industry, in my humble opinion, I've been here almost 20 years, is that this is an industry that is built on fear, right? Every day, people could lose their jobs over making one bad decision. So when you think about the power dynamics and the hierarchy, sort of like, I get the psychology of that. But I think the benefit of being a producer, and what makes the one of the beauties I love, is that you do have that hiring power. You do get to say who's in the room, and making sure that you're casting and that you're crewing up and staffing a room of people that looks and is representative of the world. And more importantly, giving people those shots so that, there's a pipeline of people going upstream that can eventually become those high top gatekeepers who understand the culture, who understand the value of not leaving billions of dollars on the table because people want to be seen in their stories. And I find that, for all the challenges of this moment that we're living in, like, that possibilities really are endless, truly. And it has democratized, right? The sort of like social media and TikTok, for better or worse, has democratized entertainment in a lot of ways. And it puts the power back in the hands of creators, of producers, of people that, in my opinion, is just being entrepreneurial to forge that path. So it really is like you said, taking a machete and carving your own path. I always say, when people ask me for this advice, well, great, but like, how do I start? And I always say, start where you are. Lean into what you have instead of looking at what you don't have. So for people who have similar questions, what would be your advice on the other side of what you've done?
About starting?
Yeah, just like how they can get started.
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest gift I have is community. As filmmakers, you need people, and we all have these collective dreams. Every time I'm on a set and I'm just waiting around, I look around and I'm like, everyone here was like a 7-year-old kid who was like, I want to do this one day, and here we all are. So I always stress, like, leaning into community to create is the way, whether you're just starting or you've been doing this for 30, 40, 50 years, I think it's the only way to really make something special. So starting with community, because you're going to find friends who, like right now, I'm literally in the middle of a shoot today, and we're all friends. We're all friends. We, from the DP to the PAs. So leaning into community is my biggest word of advice.
Yeah, I think that's really important, because the thing is, it's like you already have all the resources around you. That's the truth of most artists. Like when we are artists, we always draw people around us that have the same kind of vision and mindset. So it's really important to have that community and to rely on them. I think also what's really important too is to really understand what it is you want out of this. Like, what do you want to do? Like, as an artist, as a whatever that happens to be, like, what is it that you want? Like, people can't, I think if you come at this like, I want to be famous, I want to be rich, I want to be a star, that's not what it is. What it is I want to tell the story of who I am. That's what I think is the most important thing. So to identify all those things, and then, from that, maybe all of those other things like fame and wealth and all that can come. But the most important thing is your story, and just defining your story and figuring out what that is and figuring out how to tell it. Like, whether that's, through all of these resources that we have at our fingertips. We have basically like the ability to make movies with our phones. It's really incredible. Like, we can do so much with what we have in our pockets right now. So it's so incredible, like the things that we have at our disposal if we have that story to tell. So just find out what the story is.
Yeah, and I'd say really, really love it. Because you're going to have a lot of days where you feel like, oh, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. But if you wake up the next day and you're like, I'm ready to fight again, then you know that you really, really love it, because it's so important. There's going to be these moments where you are going to just hear something that you're going to be like, I can't believe somebody said that to me. And it's just what happens, But if you really, really love it, you don't pay attention to that so much. Sort of be able to drown out the noise a little bit. And again, like what Michael was saying about community, you really got to find the right people to sort of rally around you, because you're going to have to rally around them at some point. And that's what's really going to be able to like push it forward. And also like never letting anybody tell you that your story doesn't matter. I think a lot of times we go into a meeting and you're like, I got this story about, my grandmother did this and that. And they're like, well, somebody already made a movie like that. It's like, yeah, but it wasn't my story. It wasn't my grandmother's story. So just because they'll tell you that, well, we've seen 5 movies like that before, you haven't seen my movie like that. So never let anybody tell you that your story doesn't matter, because it really does, because it's individual to you. And that's the one thing you have over everybody else. Everybody's story in this room is different than everybody else's. And that's your superpower. So never let anybody tell you that that's not, because it's really the greatest gift that you have.
It's so true. I think also to keep in mind, you also have to, silence all of those who would criticize, especially your own criticism. Your own voice is going to tell you not to do what you're doing. Like, your self-criticism is oftentimes like your harshest critic and your largest foe. So you got to get rid of that inner critic, silence that inner critic, because we internalize all of the criticism that we've heard all our lives, and we sort of build this Frankenstein monster of an inner critic, and to dismantle that as well as you can.
It's the tenacity and resilience, right, to withstand like the endurance of this industry, of this event, pursuing anything that is worth pursuing. Like, it doesn't come fast and furious for anyone. And even if it does, like, be careful, because those stories, we've heard those stories and they don't always end up so well. So when you're having these moments, these seasons, these periods of challenge, when you're down in the dumps where shit's not going right and you're just like, I'm out, I'm going to go do something else, whatever that other thing is, what is it that sort of grounds you again, keeps you rooted, sort of refills your well to frankly, suit up and keep going to battle every day? Because sometimes that's what it feels like.
Yeah. For me, it's a couple things. It's family, remembering what really matters. We were just talking about this earlier. I went out of town a couple weeks ago, and sometimes you need to leave LA because work is everywhere. You pass a movie theater, you think about work. You go to an event, you think about work. You know what I mean? Work is everywhere. So sometimes I remove myself from work, and then just seeking inspiration from whether it be films, TV, art, music, trying to find inspiration outside of what's in front of me. And then I think the last thing for me is giving myself credit for what I've done. Because a lot of times we do, and we're looking to the future and we forget all the things we've done that's brought us thus far. Yeah, having a moment to say, you've done well. Grace.
Yeah, it's also those seasons of challenge are part of the journey. It's not, and I think it's like if you don't pass judgment on it and you just realize this is just part of it, it's not going to affect you emotionally as if you really looked at it as proof of just you're not worthy of the journey. You know, like if you just look at these setbacks, these delays, these denials as just another avenue that you're taking on your journey, it's not, don't look at that as proof that you can't do what you should be doing. You know, like don't look at that as a reason not to do it. And what's really true is if you're truly an artist, you can't help but create. Like that's the T. Like if you're an artist, you're always going to create no matter what.
Yeah, and deeply love something outside of this industry. Whatever it is, deeply love it. And it sounds weird, but don't give this thing everything. You know, even if you give 95% of it, make sure you have 5% left for yourself. Because you can give everything to it and it's not going to give you back what you think you deserve. So make sure you always leave a little bit for yourself left over. I tell like actors, directors, writers, producers, I'm like, the best thing that you should do, like the first time you have a big premiere, and you're walking on that carpet and they're interviewing you and your face is on that thing and you're like, this is the coolest night ever. The next day, drive by the venue where that premiere was and they will be breaking it down. Your face will no longer be up there. There will be another thing that they're putting up. And it's just a great reminder that like this thing, like it moves on, like without you, you will feel like the biggest person in the world. And the next day you're like, wow, they're already getting set up for something else. And that's okay. So you just understand that like because if you love something outside of it, then you're like, I've got something else to go to and to look forward to, as opposed to I'm seeing myself on this screen. And it's like, wow, you know, like we're sitting here right now, the four of us right now. And then tomorrow there will be a movie playing here. You know, it's like, it's not that I know we love it, but it's actually not that important. You know, the thing that I say all the time is that, we're not in film, we're not curing cancer. What we're doing is if we do it right, we're giving somebody who may have cancer a couple hours where they don't have to think about the cancer that they have. But we're not curing it. And we need to remember that, you know, but we are part of possibly the solution to help them, but we are not the ones curing it. So like find something else to love.
Yeah, absolutely. And the idea of being not defined by this industry is hard to reconcile with, I think, especially when you're starting out, right? You come out here with a lot of dreams and it takes sometimes a decade for, at least for me, just for that idea to even land of like my self-worth is not tied to success or to the seasons or to the paycheck or the face on the poster or whatever. It takes a lot of growth to get there. It doesn't just happen, frankly. And that's a journey worth going on, I think. But for you guys who have acted and produced in one specific project where you maybe have had to wear both hats in a really tangible way, how was that experience for you? And how do you sort of compartmentalize this left brain, right brain that you have to be, especially on smaller projects with smaller teams where, you know, you are sort of juggling a lot? How has that been for you?
Stressful.
How do you do it?
Stressful, but also I'll always go back to this community. I think as a producer, you have to realize that you have hired and brought together a bunch of experts and that you don't always have to be in every conversation. You don't always have to make every decision. You can empower your team to, you know, have the agency to call different shots. And I did a independent film last summer, and I was a producer and I was an actor on it. And the day that I had to film, I trusted that everybody else would be able to do what they were supposed to do, and that was the case. But yeah, it's also a little stressful, for sure.
Yeah, the stress is like such a major part of it, but also I think it's really, you're right. It's about delegating. You don't have to do everything. You can get the people that you're working with and lean on your community. That's the most important part of community, so you can really trust them to do the job. And I think like to just know that it's all going to be okay. And the thing is like I'm more used to doing everything than not. Like I'm more used to being all hands on deck than a hired hand. So to me, that's more familiar to be doing it all. So it's just taking it with just building in time to breathe through it. Also, I have a really strong meditation practice, which actually helps me during the really stressful times. So something like that may be beneficial when you're approaching doing it all.
Yeah, meditation. I'm like on my 18th, like was it like 1,800 consecutive days of meditation? Yeah,
Awesome.
Yeah. But I think I always say, you know, you turn arguments into conversations, and the way you do that is by when you first start your project, you empower everybody to know that they have a voice. Because I think so often we see writer, we see director, we see actor, and then we forget about everybody else. And the thing that I did with my film this past year was I made sure that everybody knew that they had a voice, so that, you know, things that may be arguments would just be conversations. And you get so much more out of people when you actually empower them. But you don't just tell them, you actually empower them to believe that they're like the way you've empowered them is going to be beneficial to the thing. You know, you remember, I mean, I think acting is a team sport. It's not tennis, it's not golf, it's basketball, it's football, it's soccer. You need everybody. And I think when you're an actor, there's this idea where it feels very like insular, and it feels very much like me. But in reality, like it really takes everybody. I remember I used to, when a movie would be over, I would like leave the theater. And now like I sit and I look at every single name, because just in the off chance that maybe the gaffer is sitting in this theater, I want to honor that gaffer. Like because if you take one name away from that long scroll, the movie doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen. And I think we get so sort of enamored with like the big names, but it's really everybody else that makes a movie go, you know? Because I say, and I also learned every job in this industry. I made sure I was a PA at one point. I did every job so that I knew that like, wow, like I knew how to sort of like connect with everybody in all of these jobs. Because I think like the gaffer, they may not be the best actor, but they could try. I can't gaff. You know, I just can't, you know what I mean? Like, and so like realizing how important all these people are, like know their names, look at them in their eyes when you see them every day. You know, if you're a producer, like every week I made sure that my crew had a food truck out of my pocket, and it's just to thank them. And I remember they would come up to me like, people wait to the end of a shoot. We've been working for 3 months and somebody gets us a donut truck, you know? And it's like, these are millionaires. And I'm sitting here being like, dog, I don't have those millions of dollars, but y'all gonna have a food truck at the end of every week. And they work their asses off for us to make the thing as beautiful as it is. But because I saw them, we don't see each other, you know, and it's the most important thing to do. It's the easiest thing to do. And somehow we make it the hardest thing to do, is just to see people. So when you're on your sets, see everybody, because they matter just as much as you do. If you're the director, the writer, or the actor, everybody matters. So make sure you know and empower them to know how important that they really are.
And that film that he just talked about is streaming on Hulu right now. It's called She Taught Love, and it's beautiful.
Thank you, Michael.
Check it out. It's on my list.
Thank you.
So good.
That's the star right there. Go ahead, Arsema Thomas.
What?
Beautiful film.
Yeah, thank you, Michael.
I think
appreciate
there's so much misconceptions about producers and what they do and what it means to walk this path. However you got into it, I think for me, I always thought, oh, the producer is the person who sits at the monitor with their Starbucks and like leaves, and just rolls up in their Tesla for the day. And that is a type of producer. They exist. They're out there. We got to deal with them. But there's a lot of other shades of what it means to be a producer. And I certainly had misconceptions. And I think on the other side of having a career now for a decade and I've spoken to over 100 producers on my show, I think I've been able to really discern a lot of those misconceptions. But I'm curious if you had any misconceptions about what you thought it was going to be like to be a producer when you stepped in, and what was like a takeaway where you're like, oh shit, like I didn't realize that was also part of the umbrella of producing.
I think from the outside looking in, when it came to film and TV specifically, I didn't realize that your main job was people. I thought your main job was just making the movie. But in it now, I realize that you are the people person, for better or worse. For me, for better, because I love people. But yeah, that was the biggest treat of learning what the inside looked like.
Yeah, that's it. That's like you're like connecting people. Like you're the sort of the hub of all of the relationships that everybody is creating on set, between the departments, between the sort of creative versus technical versus sort of the afterlife of it. You're there for the project from inception till release and beyond. So I think it's like you're basically the hub of all of the relationships. You're the plug. You're plugging everybody into what's going on.
Funny enough, a producer friend gave me advice one time. He was like, always stash a box of chocolate. And when things are going crazy, sneak it out on the crafty table. And that made me realize how much influence you have over like the morale of the set. Yeah, that was something that I keep with me to this day.
It's a chocolate.
That story distracted me because I'm thinking about chocolate. No, I think it's true. And I think there's also so much value in however you get to your path as a producer, no matter where you want to be. I always stress this, like learn the physical side of making a movie. I have a lot of people that come to me and say, I want to be a producer, but I want to be a creative producer. And nowadays I'm like, what does that even mean anymore? To me, it's like the way producing was defined back in the day. You go watch any movie from the 80s, there's like two producers or like one producer. It's like there was a person who produced the movie, and now these jobs have been so segregated in a lot of ways, and with a lot of different people and financiers and all of that getting producer credits, it can dilute what the title means, and that's something that a lot of people are sort of trying to change and figure out, like, how do we evolve from this? But I always say, like, to get on set, to go learn an aspect of physical production, of actually making something, so that it empowers you creatively as well. If you know parameters, if you understand the costs and budget. And to your point with people, what I've learned is that when you start to then ask people to come work with you, they know they can trust you as their producer, right? That you're in good hands because you understand the implication of what it means to do X, Y, Z. You're not just asking for the world of someone for $2, without really understanding what it takes to do that job. So I always like to stress that because it's really, really important, especially as we're entering a season or have been in a season of really taking ownership of your career and creating stuff for yourself. And that's how you learn. If you go make things, then you learn how to be the person making things. So that's just my PSA on physical production. With the industry constantly evolving as it has been, in your perspective, with the shifts that we're going through right now, there's a lot going on with AI, the strikes, production leaving the state and the sort of country as a whole. What are the things that you're most concerned about and conversely most excited about this huge moment we're living in?
I would say the thing that I'm most concerned about is real artists being pushed out in a way where they don't feel that their stories matter or are necessary. And I think that this is an industry that we need real artists. It was built on the backs of real artists. It has withstood all of the chaos on the backs of real artists, and it'll only continue on if real artists are here. And you can see that it's starting to feel like if you're a real artist, you're not necessary. And I think I have a theory, and I could be wrong or I could be right, and they'll cut my brakes off when I'm leave here because I'm right on the money with it. But I think that I think if we dumb down the material that is being consumed and put out into the world, it's almost as if it starts to almost mimic and mirror sort of what it would look like if a computer had written it. And so then you get to a space, I think, where you find where a studio says, well, I mean, it's all kind of just the same thing, right? And then there will be no more writers. And I think that that's why an artist is important, because a computer can't write from here. It doesn't have that. And so that's why artists have to fight back. I say that there's like this incredible tide that we're swimming against, and I just hope that every day you all wake up and you keep swimming, because it can start to feel like, well, I'm getting tired, and I think that's what Michael and Margaret are talking about. Is community, is like finding a community of artists who are also fighting that same fight, who are gonna tell you that their struggles and the things that they're going through, to sort of help you realize that you're not alone. Because I do think that if we get too close to just what they're asking us to put out, that is how they will get rid of artists, because it won't be needed anymore, because the consumer is who they're looking to say, like, well, what do you want? And if 5 out of the 7 things that they want are kind of the same thing that feels like it was written by an AI or a computer, then they'll be like, well, let's just keep doing that. Like it will phase us out we're thinking that, oh, it's the AI, but it's like, no, sometimes you go into these meetings and they want you to write. It's why IP is so important to them, to a studio, because without IP, you have ownership over the thing, and they don't want you to have ownership over a thing. So, if you write this incredible film and it's the biggest film, then the next thing they're going to offer you is something that's already pre-existing IP. Because then when that thing is successful, because it's a thing like, okay, look at like Spider-Man, right? So like people can say, oh, I watch it because of Tom Holland, right? And he's like, this thing made $500 million. And he can go to the studio and be like, I demand this. They're like, well, we'll just put somebody else with the mask on, right? But if you created his own hero, you can't make the thing without him. And so it's really about empowering each other to keep creating things that are like outside of because they're going to offer you the IP, because now they own you. And so if you're like, nah, actually I get offered stuff and I'm like, nah, the next thing I'm going to write is going to be something I created, because I'd rather risk that than just take a big check and be like, oh, okay, cool. Like I got this check. Like now, like I'm, it's like you go watch the tentpole movies. Rarely are you ever like, who wrote that? Who wrote that? It's like, if we get back to real artistry, the person on the street, when you ask them, do you love this movie? Yeah. And you say, who wrote it? They'll know your name, as opposed to, did you love that movie? Yeah, I loved it. Who wrote it? They're like, I don't know. We have to get back to making writing matter, because that's the only way that this industry will forge on.
Yeah. That's what I'm excited about. That energy that I'm starting to feel from a lot of artists. I moved from New York 4 years ago to LA, and New York, let's go. And I started in theater, and the way we work in theater, theater kids. And the way we work in theater is very collaborative. Before a play goes up, it'll probably have a few readings, a workshop, and then it's produced. Being in LA, working in TV and film feels like it's either you are auditioning or you're booked, and there's no in between. So I started a thing called Seen and Heard. Essentially, right now it's a table read series, and we create space for writers and producers to just workshop something, and hear it out loud with actors, and bring in a director to kind of shape it and do a public reading. And just through doing that, we've done 2 iterations of it. Through doing that, I've just seen the thirst and the hunger for people to really continue to create. Even if, and I always tell everyone, don't come in the room expecting that this is an audition or this thing will be sold. Come in and just try things. Come in and just experiment. This is the space for that. So I'm excited I think this is a window of, like, a lot of systems are expiring in Hollywood, and they're antiquated and they have to be, destroyed and built again. And there are a lot of people at the top who are scared of that. And we are noticing it, and we're working against it. So I'm excited about that energy that I'm feeling from people.
And I think AI should just be used for things that are really important, like making it look like cats are really eating ramen with chopsticks. Like that, that's really the only appropriate use for AI, in my opinion. Because, really, like, you can't make a cat do that, but you can with AI. And, like, that's what it's for.
I agree.
I think one thing that confounds me about the way the industry is shifting is that you look at Joker 2 that just came out, and I haven't seen it. But, that movie lost $150 million is the estimation, right? And what I always find so interesting is everybody likes to talk about risk. Oh, we got to, risk is too risky. $1 million is a risk. It's like, but you take these big swings, and I understand that the big studios are working at a different level. They're servicing a different lord. I get all of that. But think about if they had just made that same movie for 100 million or 75, let's just be modest, and what they couldn't have done with that other $75 million in terms of putting that back into interesting, unique stories. What I find fascinating is that franchises today were at one point just original stories, right? Like it's crazy. So these remakes in the 80s, these were just original wild films. Like Beetlejuice would never get made today. You know what I mean? If that shit was pitched. So it's just crazy that, like, we know this, but there's a sort of like amnesia problem we have about what ends up working is when we take risks, when we empower new voices to rise up. We'll always have sort of like the popcorn movies. That is also important because that helps that person with cancer laugh for 3 minutes. We need that. But the stories that we're talking about, the reasons we find ourselves and see ourselves mirrored in our experience of humanity, that I think is what we have to collectively continue to fight for.
And I think what speaks to the Joker is that, so whenever the first one came out, like, sure, it made $1 billion. So of course they're thinking, well, we'll pay $200 million for another one. But what it speaks to is the disconnect between, like, these studios and people, and actually wondering, do people actually want another Joker 3-4 years or 2, whatever many years have passed from the other one? They're not talking to anybody. Mm-hmm. And that is the problem. I think that film used to be really like, where you would sort of like, the streets would be like, yo, like, we want this. And you're like, all right, cool. Like, I don't remember a bunch of people clamoring for another Joker. Like, I mean, maybe I'm not the demographic, but like, there's not a bunch of my friends like, man, I can't wait for the Joker too. And yeah. So like, yeah, it's like, but if you were a studio or you're producers and you're actually like getting in the weeds, which would actually require you to like talk to human beings and like put yourself around people, you'd be like, wow, nobody's really asking for this movie. Yeah. You know what I mean? So maybe we come back to, the director and the writer and say, you know what? We'll give you $75 million to make the next one. you know? And it's like,
That's
well,
right.
I want 200. It's like, well, the streets are saying 75 million.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's like, you got to
And-
actually connect with people.
And it seems like the people that have the sway with the studios, the filmmakers that have that kind of sway and cachet to be able to demand things like that as well, which is what I've heard through the grapevine, that breed of filmmaker is dying off. Like, who coming up is, where's the next Spielberg? Like, where are these people that are going to rise the ranks? Like, I don't think we're going to have that it's going to become in a way a lot more, again, democratized, because you're going to be like, no, this is the cost. Let's just make it for what it costs. Like, how about that? And what other business are they like, it costs this, but we want you to give us twice more. And they go, okay, like only in Hollywood, you know?
The best writers in the world, like, they wrote a script and in a place they wrote a script and lived in a zip code that when they moved from, they never went back to. And what I mean by that is that once you sort of change, like, you get all the money, you have all the things, and then you sort of leave everything that made you who you are. And I'm not saying that you actually have to, like, live in that same space, but it's about staying connected to the thing, because there's something magical about, like, that little apartment where you wrote Jaws. I don't know where Spielberg was probably a big house. I don't know, but I'm just saying. But it's something magical about that community. You know, that, like, when you become this big superstar, and then the town tells you that you're a god, you're kind of like, oh, I'm away from that. It's like, you got to get back to your roots.
Well, like Todd Phillips, who made Joker, the Jokers, like that way. Of course, he's incredibly famous filmmaker, but his roots, like, if you go back to his roots, it's a documentary that he made in NYU called Hated, which is about G.G. Allen, and it's him. G.G. Allen was this, like, punk rock guy who would eat a bunch of laxative before the show and then just shit all over the stage, and so that's, like, you know, where he comes from. So I think he needs to get back to that. Like, if he could just get Joaquin Phoenix to eat a bunch of laxative, that would be like the next blockbuster.
Seen the Joker too?
I haven't, but I think
what happens.
that he does do that, and Lady Gaga too.
I was going to say, metaphorically, isn't he still doing?
But what's so amazing about the Joker, the sort of miss of Joker 2, is the rise of the Terrifier series, the series of the Terrifier franchise, which is so indie. Like, the first Terrifier, I believe, was made for less than $50,000, and it was a fucking masterpiece, you know? So it's like, it's so humble of, like, the origins with such authenticity and such grit. So I think when we're really afraid of, like, AI, and we're afraid of these sort of big franchise movies, we can't lose sight of the fact that audiences still respond to the truth. So if we give them the truth, we will get something good back from them.
Okay, here's a question that I love to ask people on the podcast, that I'm curious for your answer. What is one of the most worthwhile investments that you've ever made? And it doesn't have to be financial.
Myself.
Okay, that was fast.
Yep.
Boom.
Yeah, I agree. I think without having a practice of centering yourself, grounding yourself, loving yourself, you will get lost. People will tell you who you are, and in this crazy town, that's the norm. So yeah, I agree.
For me, that's prioritizing peace, so that your peace is first and foremost the most important thing, and then beyond that, everything else is fair game.
I usually get ketamine treatments and therapy as a response on the show. So this is cool as well. Not many of those producers did not start as actors, and that's probably the difference, right? Well, thank you guys so much. Thank you to the audience for turning up on a Saturday. Thank you, Imani and Proof and American Cinematheque. Michael, Margaret, Darrell, thank you for sharing this stage with me. And I'll get better at, like, learning time for the next one.
You're amazing.
So
Give
thank
it up.
you. Thank you guys so much. Thanks so much for tuning in and doing this live thing with me. If you like the show, please don't forget to subscribe on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. I'm at Carolina Gropa. The show's at Angle on Producers. And I'll see you next week. Beijos.